you've learnt to dial your old-fashioned car radio into there's the static in between the stations, and now you've learning to how much to spin the dial, and you didn't realize that night before you got into bed that you spun your dial maybe by accident or on purpose before you got into bed, and you were in tune with a different frequency that you'd heard before. New radio station came online.
Doug, it's so synchronistic because that is exactly the example I would use to people is especially as I wanted to get better at telepathy. It's like I want to make sure that that dial, that station I'm listening to isn't just a little bit off and I'm getting a little static. I wanted to tweak that dial just a little bit to make sure I was smack on to that station.
Welcome to the podcast that guides men to demystify and develop their intuition. I'm your host, Doug Bites. Let's dig into the science and expand your horizons.
Today's guest, Dan Goerke, is a Reiki Master and a telepathic intuitive who offers a unique bridge for caregivers seeking connection with their loved ones who are facing cognitive decline. He's written his memoir entitled Unbelievable, Unforgettable, of caring for his wife Denise, who had younger-onset Alzheimer's. Faced with a diagnosis at her age of 56, Dan's caregiving role was thrust upon him. He offers many useful tips to other caregivers and tells the heartwarming story of their journey. Dan's work empowers caregivers by facilitating communication beyond spoken words and offering practical, experienced tools and tips. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here, Doug. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And I only heard of Dan, came across him just under 2 weeks ago when he appeared on an episode of the Telepathy Tapes. And I'm just going to give a plug for them right now. If you haven't listened to the Telepathy Tapes and you're listening to me talk about intuition, I strongly recommend. I don't know how long they've been out. It couldn't be more than a year. I'm not that sure, but I find them absolutely amazing to listen to, and I won't go into what they're about, but they're one of my most favorite podcasts, the Telepathy Tapes. Go and have a listen, and do yourself a favor. Don't start at the end listening to Dan's. His was the last episode. I think that one comes out every 2 weeks. So in 2 days' time, I think we're due for another episode. Go back to season 1, episode 1, and you'll get the gist of the whole thing. Go through them properly. So how did you appear on the Telepathy Tapes, Dan?
Yeah, and it's so glad. I think we've talked before about how, the universe, source, whatever you want to call it, lines things up for you. And that was certainly the case with the telepathy tapes. I had a friend of mine say, hey, take a look at the telepathy tapes. And I watched a couple episodes, and my reaction was probably unlike most everybody else. I looked at it and watched and said, yeah, I know. I know those people can speak telepathically to other people because I do that. And I thought, but yet at the same time, like you, I was so excited that this conversation and conversations, plural, was getting out into the world. And people were beginning to see that, yes, the telepathy is out there, telepathy works, and it's a great thing. So kind of fast forward, I got an email, just like 2 weeks after my friend told me about the telepathy tapes. It said, "Hi, I'm Catherine Ellis. I'm one of the producers of the telepathy tapes. Would you be interested in being on our podcast?" And I'm like, "Whoa, okay." And I said, "Sure." I emailed back. We set up a time to talk pre-podcast. And I said, "How did you ever find me in the universe of everybody that's out there?" And she said, "Well, we get hundreds, if not thousands of emails." And I was going through them. This is Catherine speaking. I was going through them, and she said, somebody said, "Hey, what about, you're talking mostly about autistic kids. What about telepathy with people that have Alzheimer's?" And she thought, huh. So she gets her search engine out, puts in telepathy, Alzheimer's. she said my name was right at the top. And so she reached out, contacted me, and within 10 days of that contact, we're filming the podcast for it. And she also said at the same time she had ordered my book and read it and wanted me to talk mostly about my caregiving experience with Denise and how that went and how telepathy folded into that caregiving experience. And the reaction has been unbelievable. I think that obviously that's how you found me. Other people have been emailing me, setting up consultations with me to talk about, because I tell people during a session I conduct, I talk about obviously telepathy. I communicate with their loved one who has gone silent, mostly due to Alzheimer's, but it can be other conditions. But I also, having spent 12 years or so as a caregiver for my wife and studying caregiving and learning more and more about it, I fold in suggestions, tips. Have you tried this in your caregiving role? And so it's a unique combination that I offer people, and more, again, like I said, more people have been calling me and wanting to have those sessions with me. So and I'm very, very happy, as you are, that the telepathy tapes have zoomed to, I think, one of the top, if not the top, podcasts here in the United States.
Yeah,
So
it's great because I know, like it just shows how far we're evolving and how fast we're evolving. That because probably 10 years ago, I read a book. Have you heard of a gentleman called Graham Hancock?
I have not, no.
He's a I won't describe him properly because I don't know the terminology. Well, let's say he's an amateur archaeologist and he's upset the archaeological world considerably with he because he hasn't formally been to university for 10 years studying archaeology, but he's very interested in the topic. And so he's gone and he does a lot of studies in that area and he has a reasonable following. He's written quite a few books. Now, one of his books was a fictional knowledge, a fictional book, and it was all about a lady going on a DMT trip and going back, and she was going back 12,000 years in this trip. And on when she would go back, she would be with this Neanderthal community who just grunted, but they all used telepathy. And all of a sudden, they're speaking to her with telepathy, and it was a very fast-paced book. It really got me in. I couldn't, it was one of those books that when you're in the second last page, you're really feeling down because the book's about to be over, and you're like, oh, where am I going to find another book like this to read? And that was 10 years ago, and it was just so far-fetched that people would be communicating telepathically. And now here we go, like just so it was sort of like a race like that, the Neanderthals. Well, I can't even say the word properly, but back there we always sort of looked down on it, that they couldn't speak, they grunted, they were cavemen, they were you know but in this book it portrays them as extremely intelligent, extremely compassionate, people communicating how they did. And here we go now with this is real, like in the telepathy tapes are like putting the message out. And one thing I'm just really curious that, and for those who haven't listened to the tapes, when you get several episodes in, they start to talk about a location called the Hill. I'm really curious, in your communications with Denise, was there any thought there that she may have been venturing off there at all or not? Or was it just completely between the two of you?
A little of both. So, can I go ahead and tell the story of how it started, maybe, and
Please,
then
please,
because
yes. Yeah,
as with everything, it evolves, right?
yes.
We evolve, I evolve, you evolve, and it did go to. I didn't call it the hill at the time. I didn't know that term, but she certainly spent a lot of time on the other. Well, I'll call it the other side, right? So, but yeah, I was she was diagnosed at age 56, jumped into this role of caregiving for her, and joined, several support groups, reached out to the Alzheimer's Association for help. How do I do this? And was doing all the physical things that I knew how to do. Yet, with this disease, it progressively gets worse. With some, it faster than others. And Denise's, even though she was very active physically, her decline physically was pretty rapid, to the point where she was not able to figure out simple tasks like getting in a car and sitting on the commode. And I just was confounded about how she just couldn't figure out. She would stand there in front of things, or in front of the commode, and I'd like, okay, sit down now. And just simple things like that were just so mind blowing to her. She couldn't figure it out. So it was so getting to be so frustrating caring for her, because of those situations. Everything would take longer. Getting to doctor's appointments, even going to the grocery store, would take a long time, just trying to get her sitting in the front seat of the car. So those things were going on at the same time. We were basically the same age. I'm still working full time. And I remember coming home one day from a very difficult day at work. And of course, she's at home. I'm worrying, what is she doing at home to stay active and hopefully out of trouble. And we had dinner. Fortunately for me, she liked to go to bed early. So I walked her in the bedroom, got her ready for bed, put her to bed, said goodnight, and walked back out. And as was my ritual at that time, I got a glass of red wine, and had a glass, and probably had another glass, and probably had another glass. And so it gets, I'm tired. I go back to bed, and I'm laying there next to her. She's fast asleep. And I thought in my mind, I said the statement, Denise, this whole thing would be a lot easier if I could talk to you and you could talk back. And Doug, in my mind, I heard the words, and I heard her voice, the intonation of her voice, and I heard her voice say, talk to me. And first thing, I looked down. Nope, she's fast asleep. It wasn't her talking to me verbally, her physical self talking to me. And I said, okay. So one of the biggest problems we're having right now, Denise, is getting you on the commode. It's taking sometimes an hour, if you can believe that, to get her on the commode. Yeah, huge chunks of time. And it wasn't just a time thing. It was just a struggle. There's almost a mini battle going on to get her to sit down. So I said, telepathically, I didn't realize I'm telepathic at this point, but I'm talking to her and saying, okay, one of the biggest issues is getting you on the commode. How do we do that so it's easier for both of us? And she started putting these pictures in my mind of things to do. And she said, okay, put one hand on my hip, one hand on my shoulder, position me this way, push here, push there. And again, all the while showing me pictures of how to do this. And I'm like, wow, okay, great. I have a plan, right? At the very least, I have a plan. And I go to sleep. The next morning, I'm excited. I get up. Who is ever excited about going to the bathroom, right? But I was. And so I get Denise up, and we go into the bathroom, and I'm doing exactly as she showed me to do in my mind's eye, and speaking to me telepathically. And she was sitting there within 10 seconds. And I'm like, yes, I'm so excited. I'm like over here, the NFL player that scored a touchdown. I'm doing this dance in the bathroom. And she yells at me. She says, get out. and and I gladly got out. But it was so easy and so just calming for me and for her too, to have this easy method to get her on the commode anymore. And so, okay, that night, same thing. I'm in bed, but very purposefully this time I said, Denise, and she goes, yes, telepathically, she's asleep. And I said, okay, that worked great. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's try the car this time. We're having trouble getting you in the car. And again, the same thing happened. She's showing me pictures and what to do, what not to do. And again, the next day, same thing. We get to the car. Within seconds, I've got her showing, I'm doing what she showed me, and she's in the car. This time I closed the door, and as I'm walking around the back of the car, I'm doing my victory dance. So she didn't have to put up with that. And that began my journey with telepathy. And it just was such a relief to find these, you know, physical methods to help her. And you know, obviously it would help both of us, and made that part of the journey, you know, a whole lot easier. So the conversation continued. I would ask her, "Hey, are you getting the food you want? Do you want something else to eat?" You know, telepathically, you know, before I would make dinner. And she'd, you know, tell me some things every so often, you know, ask how you doing, what else do you need, what do you want? And, you know, a lot of it was she wanted to go on hikes still and do different things. So it just really kind of targeted how I should do my care for her. And one of the great stories and outcomes of the telepathy was, I guess you could say it, going to the hill. My dad passed away when he was 56. I was 26, I think, at the time. So that was in 1985. He started coming to me telepathically and talking to me.
This is
My
back, just to clarify, sorry, this is back shortly after he passed away, or when this is happening with Denise?
Yeah, yeah, great question. It was shortly after I started speaking telepathically with Denise.
Okay, your
So
dad
all of
started
this
coming to
is
you.
in the 2016 timeframe. So a good 30 years after he passed away. And no inkling of communication with him on the other side in that 30 years. And then all of a sudden he starts popping in, and I see him as this healthy, vibrant person again, the dad I knew and loved. And so he started communicating with me. He had this passion, loved. He was a mechanical engineer, loved all things mechanical, loved sports cars and convertible sports cars. And I would see these images. He would show me images of him driving in these sports cars, and just big smile on his face. And you know, it brought a smile to my face too, that okay, he's over there on the other side showing me how much fun it is, and that he's okay. And that was a great feeling. Shortly after he started coming in, I would see he and Denise together. Again, this is Denise's higher self that I'm communicating with, her soul, so to speak. And the two of them are talking, laughing, having fun. Denise is getting in the convertible sports car with him and sitting there laughing and smiling, her blonde hair flying, you know, as they're driving around and having such a good time. And it was, again, just this heartwarming feeling that one, that I could see my dad again. And he was in a good place. And second, that Denise was there with him having a good time. Because as an Alzheimer's patient, you don't have a good time, right? It's a mess. And she was having a good time. So let me get to the time frame again. Dad passed away in 1985. I met Denise about 10 years later, 1995. Her parents had passed away already, so we kind of had that bond and common thing between us. So I had never met her parents. Denise had never met my parents. My mom passed away 2 years after my dad. So no contact between between me and her parents My parents and Denise, none, no physical contact at all, just pictures, right? So shortly after Dad and Denise are doing this sports car thing together, one night I'm putting Denise to bed. And she liked to have a story read to her, kind of like a kid. It's what happens with Alzheimer's people too. They kind of revert back. They like to have things that are familiar with them and that were familiar with them as a kid. She liked to have a book read, a story. So she's laying there in bed, eyes closed. I'm getting ready. I open the book. All of a sudden, she sits up, eyes wide open. She's clearly awake. She turns and looks at me and says, "I'm really looking forward to getting to know your dad."
Mm.
And
Wow.
I'm like, whoa, whoa. And that still gets to me today. I didn't need validation at all that I was communicating telepathically with Denise or my dad, yet bam, there it was. There it
Mm.
was right in front of me. So yes, back to your question about the hill or the other side, as I call it. Yeah, that there is that place where our loved ones gather, they communicate with each other, they talk about us. They are there to help us. So absolutely, as I don't want to spoil the telepathy tapes, but as the autistic kids get together on the hill and they talk and they converse, that's the way it is with our loved ones on the other side, or even our higher selves who, like Denise's, that went there prior to her passing along. So
Mm.
there you have it. Pretty
Interesting.
wild stuff.
It is. And so, as much as you didn't need validation, you knew it was real, you knew it was happening. What stage are you at here with sharing this information with other people who have a loved one who has Alzheimer's or not? Are you sharing
Yeah,
this yet? How's that running?
yeah, I'm not sharing it as yet. Now, Dad was always great because he told me do the best you can. He never said, playing sports, go out there and, hit a home run, or I want all straight A's in class in school. He always said, just do the best you can. I'm like, I love that. Love that. So I had that and that mentality about telepathy too. I said, okay, this is great. I love this. It's going to help. Yet I want to be the best telepathizer to Denise that I can. So I Googled a search engine, telepathy communication or something like that, and this woman popped up, Louise Hauk, and I read her website. She teaches people to telepathy. She consults people, but she also takes on people and trains them to be telepathizers. And I said, perfect. That's what I want. I want training. I want to get better. I want to make sure I have crystal clear communication with Denise telepathically. So we talked, we hit it off, we became friends. I took her course. She's been here to Atlanta and stayed at my house, and we just have continued to keep in touch. And through those lessons, definitely improved my telepathy with her. And then as time went on, other people in my circle, so to speak. But yet just did not talk to anybody else about it. I can't even remember anybody. Well, I have a few friends that are on the woo-woo side, as we like to say. And I did tell them, and their jaws dropped open, like, "You're doing what?"
Yeah, yeah, I
And
bet.
and so that network slowly began to grow, especially as I mentioned, I got very involved in support groups through my journey with Alzheimer's. That's very important for caregivers to become involved in support groups. And the people within our group, it was usually the caregiver and the person with the disease. The people that had the disease in that support group started coming to me telepathically. And I'm like, okay, this is great. Yet their spouses who are taking care of them would never believe that's what's happening. I might be ridiculed, or it might be talked of as the work of the devil, as it often has been in the past. And so I had this dilemma because they clearly had messages for their spouse. And so I asked Louise, I said, here's the situation. And she said to me, try this. Tell them that in one case, Brenda was the woman's name. Tell George that Brenda came to you in a dream and said this, this, and this. And so I said, that's brilliant. That's great. So I went to George, said, hey, George, oddly enough, I had a dream the other night of Brenda. She's worried about you. She wants you to do this, this, and this. And he goes, okay. So let's go get a taco. And I'm like, just completely blew it off. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And I'm like, he's one of these guys. Like, come on, open up, awaken, start using your intuition. So it has gradually grown, obviously, over the years that I am doing more and more of this work. It has become essentially my life's work now. I have a website, Soul to Soul Communication. I do consulting, Facebook page, etc. And I wrote the book. I finally came out and said, you know what? It's time. It is time. This is I'm following my heart, right? And that's what in the end is so incredibly rewarding. When you hear what your heart is saying, you're following it, you're taking those steps to follow that heart message, and results come. And it's like, wow, wow, this is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me, what was it like holding down a full-time job and caring for Denise? Were you ever worried, or was that when you get home that things wouldn't be wonderful?
Oh yeah. I can summarize it. I summarize what caregiving is like for caring for someone with Alzheimer's full time. And that is, it was the hardest fucking thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
Be quite blunt, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
It is so, so incredibly stressful. Um, and more so because of our age. We were younger. Denise, was working full time. She came very close to being fired from her job. And in hindsight, we didn't know it was the Alzheimer's, but she would just keep forgetting to do things that were essential for her job. And after the diagnosis, I was talking to her boss, and she said, "Yeah, I was like, I hated this, but I was going to have to fire her." So fortunately, we got the diagnosis right before that. She went on short-term disability, and so we had some income coming in. But essentially, for us younger folks that get it, we all of a sudden we have income up here, expenses okay here, and then all of a sudden half of that income goes away, and your expenses start going up and up and up. So it's really a tough situation. And probably for about a year after the diagnosis, I was still okay leaving Denise at home. She was pretty high functioning. Um, she was a person that always had to have a project. And so instead of having work projects, she would have projects around the house. Now, what ended up happening was I would get home and there were piles of projects everywhere in the house. And I'm like, okay, first few times I'm like, I'm picking this up, picking that up, putting it back over here and doing that. And then that happened every day. And I'm like, okay, I see what's happening. She's ambitious. She wants to live a normal life, which I admired as much as she could. And she kept doing her projects. But because of the Alzheimer's, she would forget what the project is and then move on to the next project that came in her head. And the same thing, she would forget how to finish that, or that she had to finish it and how to finish it. So, as a caregiver, I recognized that I had to let that go. You know, sorry, the house looks like a mess, but there was so much stress in coming home, seeing those projects and papers and everywhere, and then taking the time to pick everything up. It's like, no, no, I'm done with that. I'm not going to put myself through that. Just let it go. Let her do what she wants to do. So it was about 6 to 8 months later then that things started getting a little dicey. Every once in a while, a burner on the oven was left on. Happened too often, fortunately. But then I started looking around and thinking, golly, what else can she get into that could be harmful to her, the house, or someone else? At the time, I knew there was a statistic, and I think it's still true, that about 2/3 of those with Alzheimer's wander. They leave their house, they leave wherever they are, and go out. And I was worried, concerned about that. I did end up changing the locks on the door so that you had to have a key to literally get out of the house. Not in the house, obviously, but out of the house required a key. And I kept that key, and I was the only one that had the key besides family. But I didn't give Denise a key. And at the same time, she's driving still.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh man, that just all these things, and just it's just getting worse and more things are piling up work wise. And I said, it's time to bring in a companion care person. And so that was probably about 2 or 3 years after the diagnosis. I went through several agencies to bring somebody in. That situation wasn't working. Funny story, and because I always try and look at the funny side of this. I talked to the agency. I said, Denise is very active, very athletic. We got to have somebody that's going to go on walks with her and just be active with her. And I said, okay, okay. So the lady gets to the house, and I'm like, what? Um, Little on, I'm being kind. She was overweight, let's face it. She comes in. I said, I got to go. I can't do anything about this now. So I get home later on. She leaves. The caregiver leaves. I said, Denise, how'd it go? And she goes, I was her caregiver. I was trying to get her to walk. And I said, okay, okay, she won't be back. Then a friend said, this was actually I had enrolled Denise an adult daycare that was full of other Alzheimer's people, and they do activities for, I forget, 4 or 5 hours a day. The person who ran that program, Kay, said, you know what? I've got a good friend of mine, Rita. Why don't you talk to her and see? I think she would be a great fit for Denise. And I said, well, what kind of experience does she have? And she goes, none. She has a good heart. And I trusted Kay. I again got that feeling that, okay, I can go with this. Rita came to the house, and I opened the door, and I'm like, oh my God, this is the lady. I could just sense what, I don't know whether it was her aura or just the disposition just shone through. Denise walked up, they hugged, and they started talking. And it's like I stepped back, and like within 10 minutes of those two conversing, I'm like, we're, fine, we're done. You're hired, And they hit it off great. And they just would do things together. They'd go to the grocery store together. Rita eventually started taking Denise over to her house. They'd do laundry together. They would go to Rita's son's sporting events. And it was just it was such a relief for me. Not only that I knew that Denise was being taken care of, but that she was having fun, right? And she clicked with somebody. And so, but was with all things Alzheimer's, that the disease advances and it gets worse and worse. And one of the things that is stressful in that journey for the caregiver is managing those changes and managing everything. Prior to the disease, Denise and I, we let's face it, we shared household responsibilities. Obviously, when she got the disease, that all fell on me. So I'm paying the bills, hiring contractors when we need it. And then so there's that aspect, but there's also the aspect of managing the finances, of making sure she gets to doctor's appointments and is doing the things doctors and others have said, getting to support groups. So you be and then you become the pharmacist. You gotta order the meds. You gotta make sure that you go get them. You make sure she takes them, which was a challenge. I ended up I got a mortar and pestle, grind them up, put them in her whatever ice cream, and that's how she ended up taking them. So you become the pharmacist, the doctor, the physical therapist, every aspect of this disease process, and that was just there's no other way to say it other than tough, just tough. You're doing work full time, and then you're getting home and having to do the full time caregiver role, and yet, Doug, I didn't ever look at it like woe is me, why me? I looked at it as, okay, I'm going to do the best I can because that's my personality, and she deserves that. She deserves, she got a bad diagnosis. And so I looked at it as a growth opportunity. How can I grow? I never in a million years thought I would be a caregiver for someone with Alzheimer's, certainly. Or if I was going to become one, I would be in my 70s or 80s or maybe even 90s when it happened. And here I am in my 50s doing it. And again, it was nonetheless, even though certainly viewed it as a growth experience, it was still just extremely, extremely difficult to manage. Again, I tell other caregivers, here's what I did, and that is primarily reach out for help. That was so important in my journey to reach out for help and accept help. Going to the support groups was one of the biggest things that I did to help ourselves. And through those support groups, met some incredible people. And even though fast forward to today, all of our spouses have passed away, we still get together for dinners once a month and lunches. I had lunch with a buddy today that was in our support group, and we've stayed connected just because we had that bond, and it was so heartwarming to get together as a caregiver to talk to other people that are caregivers, and we exchange tips about what we're doing or not doing. We talk about medications and things like that. I also had a tremendous support network in Denise's siblings. She has 6 siblings, and none of them lived here in Atlanta, yet every one of them would come in on some, I don't know if they kept a schedule, but once a month, one of them, okay, I'm coming in for the weekend. You go off and do whatever you want to do, get out of here. And I'm like, I loved my respite weekends as I came to learn that that's what they were called. and I would go off to the North Georgia mountains and do some hiking, and I would get a break from Alzheimer's. I was always cognizant of the fact that I'm not leaving Denise, I'm leaving Alzheimer's for a weekend, right? And those, you know, being open to people helping you was so important, but then also saying yes when they offered. That was critical in this whole journey. Um, and so you know, fast forward, um, I also ended up having to make the painful decision to place her in memory care. And again, I had tremendous support in doing that. The kids came, we fixed up her room, and we got her there, and she's surprisingly, quite honestly, adapted pretty well to being out of the house and in memory care. So, but yeah, that and it was still, it didn't, just because she was in memory care didn't mean things were over. She had there were a lot of issues that were going on. She started having seizures, and that was a whole experience. Prior to going in memory care, she had crying episodes. And Doug, that was one of the most difficult parts of the journey, was inexplicably she just started crying. And it would last anywhere from a minute to 5 minutes. And initially, you know, what's wrong? Asking her what's wrong, trying to console her. Nothing would stop the crying. And it was just so heartbreaking, to the point where every morning, she would wake up and start crying. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you poor thing. What is going on? And just could not figure out what was going on. Talk to the docs. And it's where the telepathy comes in. After about a month, 6 weeks of toying with different meds, she came to me and said, reach out to Ginny. Ginny was a friend of ours at the Alzheimer's Association. And I said, okay. So I called Ginny, explained the situation. She goes, oh, you need to talk to Larry. Like, okay, who's Larry? Larry is one of the leading geriatric psychiatrists in the country. Okay. I said, okay. And I had met Larry through Ginny before. And so we set up this appointment. Larry and I hit it off. He's a smart ass, like I'm a smart ass, sense of humor. And he goes, okay, we're gonna give her this. Within a few days, the crying had gone down, and I'm like, yes, yes. And we maintained that med throughout the journey until meds were no longer working for her at all. But again, another use of the telepathy that was a tremendous asset and tool for me. So yeah, it was a journey, but yet again, I feel again I'm a better person because of it, and I want to give back. I want to help other caregivers and lessen that burden. Um, all too often, we in this community hear, "Oh, I didn't know there were any resources out there. I didn't know there was an Alzheimer's Association that could help. I didn't know there was a Dan Goerke that had this knowledge." And it's like, yes, yes, that's why I'm saying reach out, relax. Don't have, all too often, the male ego attitude of, I got this, I can do this. You know, I'm a guy, I'm a
Yeah.
stud, I can take care of my wife. I don't need to listen to anybody else. And I see that too often, and those are the guys that end up with, you know, bad medical conditions at the end of this,
Mm.
because they didn't take advantage of that. So
All right.
there you have it.
So I've
Probably
jotted
more
down
than you wanted to hear.
no, not at all. I've been jotting down a few questions here as we go. I've just been letting you
Yeah.
flow. So first question, like at the beginning when it all started to happen, what was Denise's awareness of it all? Did she really understand what was happening? Or did she understand for a little while and then forget?
No, she understood. That was one thing that was really impressive. Is she rarely denied that she had the disease. And she acknowledged that she had it. And she knew that it helped explain what the hell was going on. Prior to the diagnosis, we had all these weird things happening with her. And why are you doing this? And it's like she accepted the diagnosis, which that in and of itself was a blessing because I heard other couples where the person who gets the diagnosis, like for years, denies that that's what they have. I still see that today. Denise, like I said, rarely did. It was only when I was, well, doing things like taking away the car keys, for her, everybody's safety. Then, of course, she didn't have the disease, and I was the bad guy, and so be it. Um, but I felt lucky that she did accept it. Within, funny story again, within a few weeks, maybe months after the diagnosis, we're in the grocery store. We're checking out. We get to the end, and she's got her wallet. She goes, "I'm going to pay for this." I'm like, okay, fine, fine. So the cashier goes, "Okay, it's $56.48." And she starts looking through her wallet, and all of a sudden she looks up and she goes, "I'm sorry, I have Alzheimer's. What was the amount again?" And there she was in the middle of the grocery store letting everybody know she has Alzheimer's. And I'm like, that's really cool. That's really
Yeah,
great. I'm glad you
yeah,
did that. Be out
yeah.
there with it. Don't be the ostrich sticking their head in the sand. And I thought that's really cool. So she handled it pretty well. And I think another good way she handled it was she said, I'm going to live my life like I don't have it. I'm going to keep, driving. And that was fine early on. Keep going to the grocery store, keep going to the other stores and buying stuff. And she kept working out. She kept going to the gym. That was a big part. And I learned, it's important to have them keep their routine as much as possible. So she kept doing things. So she very much accepted what was going on, accepted and not. Obviously the car keys were a major thing, but for the most part, she accepted it, which again made it much easier for me.
Mm. I Before when you were talking about the new caregiver reader, and you said like you got that feeling, which obviously was like an intuitive feeling that this is the right person. We've the other friend who said you should call Rita, like yeah, and that inner knowing, and yeah, is just and that's part of why the podcast here is to encourage men to go with the gut feeling. Like you get that feeling, and because we all have times when we go, oh, I knew I should have done that, or I knew I shouldn't have done that. I knew, was you knew this is the right feeling, and you went with it, and just made life easier. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is something I did not do early on. This is not something, the intuition, trusting my gut, trusting my heart has been something that has grown in me. And I like it. In fact, I said that to somebody today. I said it's like planting a seed, and I planted that seed in my 20s or 30s, and now I'm seeing it grow after nurturing it for decades. Boy, in my teens and 20s, no, you just you followed the path that every male followed, and you didn't express your feelings, you didn't talk about your feelings at all, and yeah, my life wasn't a mess, but it was just a lot of stumbling blocks. And at the time, I just thinking about this now and thinking back about those stumbling blocks, those were there for a purpose. They were there so I would stumble. And fortunately, I woke up. I woke up to realize, you know what? This life shouldn't be that hard. I shouldn't keep stumbling. And at about the same time, I started meditating. Denise, actually, about the time I met Denise, she introduced me to something called shamanic breath work, and which is a phenomenal practice, and started meditating more. And while I had always been interested in, you could call it telepathy or mediumship, people that would talk to loved ones on the other side. I was always fascinated with it, but I thought, oh, that's great that they can do that. Maybe someday, I'll figure out how to do it. It'd be cool if I could do it. But never thought it was something I would do, but yet very open to that kind of concept. I started reading about channels, people who brought in, you know, higher beings and gave messages. And so this whole world started opening up, and the plant is starting to grow up and up and up and higher into the sun and get bigger and bigger, because I trusted that that's what I wanted to do, and just I felt this attraction, maybe some akin to the first time you see your wife. It's like, whoa, yeah, that I'm attracted to her. Well, I was attracted to people that channeled. I was attracted to shamanic breath work. I was attracted to meditating. And I kept going and trusted myself that this was the right path. I didn't know exactly where it would go, but I knew it warmed my heart, right? And every time I was like, I looked forward to meditating. I looked forward to I became a Reiki practitioner and Reiki Master, and I looked forward to those moments. Whereas, like, I like work. I like the people that I go to work for. I'm in real estate, but it's like it's not warming my heart. Yes, it pays the bills, but it's not warming my heart. It's not. I just knew that was not where I wanted to be long term. And so it was this I just say trusting and opening that happened over decades that led me to where I am today. And I think that's why when Denise said to me the very first time, talk to me, I trusted that that was her, and that that was going to be a way I could communicate with her. And I went with it and grew it, so to speak, by getting training and talking more and more to people who have the disease, and to people on the other side. So it's so much of it is trusting, like you say, trusting that gut. And as you know, guys have a hard time doing that because Dad never did it.
Yeah. So it's true. So it sounds like you like for some men listening thinking, geez, this thing just suddenly happened. Wow. But no, by the sound of it, you'd put down a strong foundation over many years of
Yeah.
meditation and breath work and all sorts of different things. So you're you've already got an invisible link with the unseen realm, which I
Hmm.
love because I'm fascinated with all things unseen. If it's out
Yeah.
there and you can't see it, or you can't touch it or see it or hear it with this physical body, like I, to me, I know it's there. What is it? How do we communicate with it? What frequency is it on, etc. And
Hmm.
you've learnt to dial your old-fashioned car radio into the, there's the static in between the stations, and now you've learning to how much to spin the dial to get into a new thing. And you didn't realize that night before you got into bed that you spun your dial, maybe by accident or on purpose, before you got into bed, and you were in tune with a different frequency that you'd heard before. Yeah, as
Oh,
a
Doug,
new radio station came online.
Doug, that is so synchronistic, because that is exactly the example I would use to people, is especially as I wanted to get better at telepathy. It's like I want to make sure that that dial, that station I'm listening to isn't just a little bit off and I'm getting a little static. I wanted to tweak that dial just a little bit to make sure I was smack on to that station and listening. So that's exactly the analogy I used as well too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then I've written down here, use it or lose it. And I can't even remember what you said there before, but something you were talking about. And I thought, yeah, like what you were talking about with these gifts you've got and that. And it just came to me, yes, we have to continue to use them or we will tend to lose them. It's a muscle you build up. It's a whatever it is, it's that the little example I gave before, the muscle memory in your fingers to be able to tune that dial exactly to that little right onto that bit. Know that once you hear that bit of static, you just go this fraction further and you've got it. And you continue to do that and it's second nature. You can do it while
Yeah.
you're doing everything else. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I liken it. I tend to. I grew up in a sports world. Right, I'm a competitive swimmer most of my life. I played football, baseball, basketball. I do weightlifting and yoga now, and I relate that to the physical body. If you've got a practice of weightlifting and you're going 3, 5 times a week to the gym, you're going to get stronger. You're going to get better at what you're doing. And you lay off a couple weeks and it's like, whoa, it doesn't work. You're like, what happened? I can't lift as much and I'm getting tired on the treadmill. And so yeah, it's exactly the same in these let's call them spiritual practices of telepathy. The more I talk to people, the more it opens up. This was a fascinating phenomenon to me too. When I started communicating, probably a year to 2 years after I started communicating telepathically with Denise, that's when, in my mind's eye, I saw all these other people, souls, higher selves, literally, Doug, lining up in front of me. And they're like, hey, talk to me. I know you can talk to us. We see it here on the other side. You're talking to Denise, you're talking to Brenda, and it's like, I want you, I got something to say. It was this like, okay, come on. And again, I was open to accepting that kind of invitation, and these folks who have Alzheimer's so badly want to communicate to their loved ones, typically, kids, spouses, and tell them, what's going on, tell them they love them, things like that. So on the cusp at the beginning of that, here's another fun story. I got a bunch of these, but I became friends with the memory care director where Denise was, and I thought, you know what? Again, my gut told me I'm going to tell Kelly, that was her name, about the communication I do with Denise. I told her the story about, talk to me and things like that, and I'm like, still a little bit in the back of my mind, like, okay, is she going to ask me to leave or call the psych ward and have them come get me? But I'm going to put it out there anyway. I get done explaining that, and she goes, "Hey, you know what? My little sister has been silent pretty much since she was 5 or 6 years old. Do you think you could communicate with her?" And I said, "Sure, sure." So, she was very open to the work I was doing. So I connected with her sister, gave her some information that her sister wanted her to know. And I said to Kelly, I was about leaving her office, and I said, hey, if there's any other residents here in Denise's wing that, you need help with, let me know. Maybe I can communicate with them. And she goes, oh, George. George is the nicest guy, and he and I would talk, and he super, super nice guy, calm, mild mannered. He had Alzheimer's for 4 or 5 years, but just a super nice guy. And she goes, George has been really agitated lately, and we cannot figure out what is going on. And I said, okay, I'll talk to George. So I go back and connect with George. George says, I want somebody to read my Bible to me. And I said, "Oh, okay. Any particular chapters and verses?" And he gave me specific chapters and verses. So I go back to Kelly the next day. I said, George said he wants to read his Bible. And she goes, "Huh, he has a Bible on his nightstand." And I said, "I bet you anything the disease has progressed so much that he's having trouble reading it." And I said, have the caregivers read to him, and try that. And by the way, here are the chapters and verses to start with. And she goes, "Great, thank you." And so I walk out of her office. I've got to go to a meeting. I go over to where Denise is sitting. She's in a communal room and they're all watching something or other on the TV. I I bend over, give her a kiss. I said, "Love you. I'll be back later." I stand up. George is standing right next to me with his Bible open, and he's looking at me. And I said, "George, I would love to read this Bible to you. You know that, but I got to get to a meeting. So let me take you over here, and maybe one of the caregivers can read to you." And I'm like, "Wow,
Mm.
wow, it works."
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, it's like all these people started knocking on my door and said, I know you can talk to us. I know you can talk to us. Come help us. So this again, but it was, again, the gut of I need to say yes. I need to say yes to this stuff, or it's not going to work. It's not going to grow and be as big, and I'm not going to be able to help as many people if I say no or doubt, even
Mm.
doubting what I can do. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I wonder on that how many of us, and when I say us, I mean the 8.2 billion people on the planet, do hear things, do receive information, and pass it off as nothing. Just hear,
Mhm.
whereas it might be the beginning of something like this, and we just ignore it or are embarrassed by it or think that's not real, that's just me, and pretend. And I mean, sometimes I'm not saying every time it is a
Hmm.
telepathic communication, but what if just 1% of the things were, like, and 1% of people on the planet became telepathic in a way like you, that is helping a very specific area or group of people, unlike the telepathy tapes with, it started with the non-verbal autistic children, and is sort of growing out now, like to you. And I think there's definitely some other group, non-autistic people, but non-verbal. And yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. And things I have heard is through some channeled information that our language is actually very, very, like the spoken word's very, very restrictive. That the telepathy is, I mean, I can't say that I'm aware of receiving any, but from what I hear, it's you start to receive smells, textures, emotions of what's being communicated to you. And so it's, a picture paints 1,000 words. So it's a
Hmm.
whole, the communication is far superior and beyond words, mere words, as we would say. Even though, as in, when the words stop, we think like it's very difficult. But now the telepathy just takes it to a whole other level. It's yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's growing. I have hope that this community is growing. I honor what the work you're doing because you're helping us men grow. I think the folks at the telepathy tapes are helping the telepathy world grow. Um, and that's evidenced by the emails that they tell me they get and the comments in the comment section. I think people are becoming more and more comfortable. That they're still, most people, let's face it, are hesitant. Another little story. So I'm on Facebook, and do the normal Facebook posts. I went on a vacation recently, threw up all my pictures and like really cool pictures of where I was, and in Zion National Park here is a phenomenal park. And and I'm not one, I don't care how many likes you get on Facebook, but I'm just a curious. So I look down like, oh, I'm getting 60 likes, 120 likes, whatever on my vacation pictures. Get back, the telepathy tapes drop. I put that up on Facebook. 7. And
Probably seven different people than
seven,
the others.
seven different,
Yeah.
seven different likes. And I'm like,
Yeah.
come on, people,
Yeah.
and I think I was talking to somebody about it, and they said, I think people are afraid to like it because then their friends will see that and think they're crazy.
Yep. Yep.
Yep. And that's sad if that's the reason. And it's like, come on, let your guard down.
But the funny thing
And
is, if it had got to like 40 or 50 and people looked and went, oh, 40 or 50 people like this, they'd like it. Because then it would be like, oh, I'll be the odd one out if I don't like it. So
yes.
there's this invisible number there of where it's acceptable and where it's not. So yeah, yeah. If you could just go into the algorithm and just start it at 25, like, oh, this post's only been on 3 minutes and already 25 people have liked it. Oh, quick. I better not like it. I better love it. Like, yeah, it's so crazy, the whole, yeah. I mean, I have a massive love-hate relationship with Facebook. I love to hate it. It's just,
Yes, yes.
yeah,
Same
yeah,
here. Same here.
yeah,
It's like, oh, the tape dropped. I gotta put it up. It's like I'll do it, but it's like I'm not looking forward to it. And maybe that's why. Maybe I was projecting that fear or concern out there, and that's why people didn't like it. So when we're all done and I'm going to post about this, well, I'll let you know how many likes I get for this
yeah.
one.
Okay.
See if it's any different.
Well, when I heard you on there, I thought, okay, this is my kind of podcast guest. This is the kind of person I want on my podcast. I'm contacting him straight away. Like, I didn't give it half an hour before I went in and started typing a message to you, because I'm thinking this guy's going to get busy quick.
Yeah.
I got to get on it. I got to sneak in now before he gets too busy with the popularity of, because the telepathy tapes, they snowballed. I'm sure in the
Yeah.
first couple of weeks they were getting, it was pretty ordinary, like, as things slowly grow. But as time goes
Yeah.
on, it's I mean, already Kai Dickens has been on the Joe Rogan show, and oh, what's the other guy? There's another. I can see his face, but I can't remember his name. But like, yeah, it's starting to take off
Mhm.
and snowball.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
yeah.
It's the right time. I think
Yeah.
people are looking for answers, and they're looking in different places
Mm,
on purpose. I like, and I liken this also to, when we thought the world was flat. And, people didn't want to venture out very far because you're going to fall off the earth, and
mm,
there's no science that says the earth is round, so
yeah.
it's got to be flat.
Yeah. Because it
And
looks
then all
flat.
of a sudden, huh?
Because it looks flat,
It
basically.
looks
Yeah.
flat, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so finally, some adventurers, some people who trusted their intuition, went out and proved that wrong, and the science caught up. And I think we're going to be in that situation soon enough. I don't know when, but I'm convinced science is going to catch up, figure out, hopefully, maybe, and not that I need it, a way that says, yeah, you know what, they are talking to other people.
Yeah.
They're talking to people, and then obviously it'll become more and more widespread. So,
Yeah. Well, I think, have you ever followed any of the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza?
oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
watch his
Well,
YouTubes regularly. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, I think he's worked with the Heart Math Institute as well, where they do, he'll get the first 100 people in the first two rows of his, week-long seminars, and hook them up with heart monitors, brain monitors, and all that sort of stuff. So Like he sort of says we can scientifically show we're watching what the monitors are showing, and we're talking to people through a meditation or whatever, and we can tell what's going to happen next. We know what's going to happen to their heart rate, their breathing rate.
Hmm.
We know which parts of their brain are going to light up in 5 seconds time, in 10 seconds time, because we've done it with 100,000 people already, and we
Yeah.
when we put them through this, so the science is sort of is there, but it's within a limited realm of people recognizing it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's all catching up. It's yeah, we're in
And and
amazing
and, and
times.
yeah, and in the meantime, like we've talked, I think there's more and more people just embracing things like the telepathy tapes, Joe Dispenza, and these other great teachers that, yeah, this stuff is real and it's working, and yes, it does take something of a leap of faith for people to say, yeah, autistic kids, yeah, I guess they can communicate. They are communicating between each other as well as their caregiver. And it takes a little bit of a leap, not, well, a leap of faith for me to say, yeah, that is Denise talking to me.
Mm,
But again, I say go keep going with it. Just go with it. Open up, little bit at a time. Hopefully it doesn't take decades like it did for me, but just be open. I say to other guys, be open to what you're hearing, your intuition and your gut say, and just follow it. And it doesn't have to be life-changing things either. If your gut is telling you, I should go this other way home tonight, and you do, and you've avoided a mess, in traffic, that's an example. Recognize that that's an example of you following your intuition and your gut, and
yeah.
keep doing things like that.
Yeah, and here's a basic one too. A couple of years ago, it was our wedding anniversary, and I work a couple of days a week, and it was a Thursday. I don't usually work Thursdays, but I'd let my boss talk me into doing an extra day that week. So I said to my wife, "Look, I got a long drive. I'm not going to be home till 7:30 tonight. We won't be able to go out. Sorry." About 4 o'clock, my schedule for the afternoon changed. My last job cancelled last minute, and I was pretty happy. So I quickly rang my wife and I said, "Hey, I'm going to be home like by a little after 5, something like that, so we can go out. I'm busy right now. You work out where we're going. Like you pick a restaurant, you do it, and then I'll just zip in, have a shower, change, and we'll go. You ring up, make the reservation." Okay, so I get home, and I said to her, "All right, great, I'm here. Where are we going?" And she's looked at me. She goes, "Well, we can go to this restaurant that we've been to a couple of times before, pizza and pasta. Or there's this other Thai restaurant, and we've been to Thailand half a dozen times. We love the food." She goes, "There's this other Thai restaurant that's very, very popular, and it's one of the best ones around, but we've never been there. Like, which one would you prefer?" And I'm like, immediately, I'm like, "Oh, I'm not ready for this decision right now because I thought you'd already organized it." And she's looking at me, and I'm standing there in the kitchen, and she knows I can sometimes be a little bit slow to answer. And I thought, I wanted to say, "I don't know." But this, before I got to say that, a voice inside me said, "You do know. Don't say you don't." So I just stood there, sort of glancing at her. And I thought, okay, this restaurant, pizza and pasta, we've been to a couple of times before, and we've had a nice meal there. It's okay. It's not outstanding and it's not bad. It's just middle of the road. If we go and have pizza or pasta, how will I feel? How will that make me feel? And I sat with that for a couple of seconds. And the whole time, my wife's standing in the kitchen looking at me. So it's a little bit of pressure, but I'm going through this motion, and she doesn't know what I'm doing. And then I thought, okay, if we go to the Thai restaurant instead, how will I feel? And I felt a little better. And I said, let's go to Thai. Boom. And so I quickly ran, had a shower, boom, jumped in the car. We drove down. We get to the Thai restaurant, and they said, "Oh, have you got a reservation?" And we got there like at 5:30 on a Thursday evening. not thinking we would need one. And we said, no. And she's like, oh, and she looks and she goes, oh, we've got just one table left. Like, but you'd have to be gone by 7. And we're like, easy. Like we don't linger a long time in restaurants. So they sit us at this little table and, we sort of look at the menu and we're not big drinkers, but they had this particular Thai beer, a Singer, which is when we're in Thailand, they're $1 a bottle and it's just our favorite beer over there. So it's like, oh, we'll have a Singer each because it's not a common beer to buy in the bottle shops where we are. So it was great. So it was like, oh, great. And we're sitting there. We had the sun shining in, like late afternoon sun, and it was great. All of a sudden, one of our sons walks in the door. He'd rung up and ordered takeout from the restaurant because he loved that. And so we chat to him for a couple of minutes, and we had the best evening, and it was so good. And so just everything went really well. And the next day I said to my wife, I told her what happened. Like, when I got home, da 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 da, and this is what I did, the process I went through. And she goes, I wanted Thai. She goes, but because it was our wedding anniversary, I didn't want to make the choice. I wanted to. So she was real happy that we'd done. And if we'd have gone and had pizza and pasta, it probably would have been okay, but it probably wouldn't have been as good. We probably wouldn't have got food poisoning or anything weird like that, but it was just a better experience. And, so it wasn't earth shattering. We didn't save the world. We just enjoyed ourselves more, I believe, by, you know, that going through that little simple process. So anything
Mhm.
from there up to, helping George be less agitated with his someone to read the Bible to him, or because he can't do it himself anymore, or way beyond that.
Yeah.
It's good reasons to tap into this stuff and go with it. You know.
I love that story because you put yourself in at the end. What is it like after we've eaten and after we've been there? How will I feel?
Mm,
And that's so ingrained with the female gender, not
mm,
us, you know?
mm.
And they can tap into it like that. And it takes a little training, right? For us to figure that one out. There's a great exercise that I learned and I work with people on now called the 4 doors. And it's where they go into, calm them down, and I have them visualize, okay, open this. Okay, I'm sorry, I should back up a little bit. They're looking for a solution to something, and there are choices. You can do A, B, C, or D, and they're having trouble picking which one to do. Okay, so we do the 4 doors. It could be 3 doors, whatever. And they go in. I said, follow. Okay, see the door, open the door, describe what's in this room. They describe it. Do it with the other three each. And in the meantime, I've written down what their choices are, and I subscribe. Okay, this choice goes to door 1, this one to 2, 3, 4. Okay, so they go in each of these rooms in their own mind, and I ask them to describe what you see, furniture, windows, whatever resonates with you. They come back out, they're all done. And I said, which room did you like the best? Where did you feel most comfortable? And most of the time they'll say, oh, the third door, or whatever. There's very certain it's the second door. And I said, great. And so I pull out, here's your answer. It's what was, you need to go to Thailand, or, something, whatever they were trying to search for, that's the answer. And it's based on this feeling of comfort, of maybe security, of that I really like this room and I like the way it's decorated, and this is going to be my choice is door number 2. And then I pull out the answer and then, yeah, go do it. You've
So
got your answer.
the four choices they had in the beginning did they tell you them or did you come up with them?
Oh no, they came up with them. They came
Right.
up with them. And
So I'm not
I
sure
had
which of the four things I should do. Right.
correct,
Okay. Yeah.
correct. As an example, I did one with a younger gentleman. I'm trying to decide whether I should stay here in my job, I should go to college, or I should go to trade school in another completely different city. And so I had him go into 3 different rooms. The answers were, those 3 were the answers. And the room he described that he liked a lot corresponded to going away to trade school. So that was the help that he, I kind of felt like I was a facilitator, but he got his own answer. I just helped him figure out what the answer was.
Yeah, you're the paper handler. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, we've covered a lot of stuff. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, I can tell you. I will have all of your contact details, how people can get in contact with you, etc. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to cover?
Wow. Wow. I can't think of anything other than just reiterating, man, just trust your gut. Men trust your gut. And
Yeah,
and even if it's a little bit at a time, you know, chip
yeah,
away at it and go with your gut and see what happens. You'll be happy with the results.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
thank you. Thank you so much. I really have enjoyed our conversation wholeheartedly. It's been great meeting you, and let's keep this going. And
Yeah.
again, I commend you for what your work and what you're doing.
Yeah, and likewise to you for like, because it's a big step for you. You know, it's one thing to talk about intuition, which people are very familiar with and know people who've had intuitive things, mostly females, but, us guys are getting it. But to go to non-verbal communication and relying on it, that's a big step you've jumped. So thank you. Yeah. All right. Thanks,
Thank
Dan.
you, Doug.
Well, we're at the end of another thought provoking episode. Remember to subscribe so you'll be alerted to new episodes. I want to say thank you to the men who are joining me on this journey of intuitive development. I truly hope our time together has expanded your reality and reinforced trust in your ever reliable gut feeling. Embrace your intuition, it will not lead you astray. Until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and trust your gut.